Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome here in the living room of the Thomas Mann House to our talk, Bridging Physical Barriers, Inclusion at the Nexus of Robotics, Architecture and Art. Tonight our guests would like to address and discuss technical innovation with human-centered design and artistic insights in order to develop environments and technologies that respond more fully to diverse needs of their users, regardless of age, gender, disability, education, economic status, and other diverse backgrounds. And one of the leading questions that will guide us through this evening is how can technology, design, and the arts come together to create spaces and systems that are more accessible and welcoming to all of us. And we have an exciting panel curated by our current fellow in resident, Robert Riener. And they will, on a very interdisciplinary perspective, they will bring these different perspectives together from robotics, architecture, health and rehabilitation, and also the performing arts, and give us new insights on how we can imagine new pathways towards more social participation and inclusion. Robert Riener, he is, as I just said, our current resident and fellow in residence, and he's professor for health science and technology. He studied mechanical engineering at the Technical University of Munich and the University of Maryland, receiving his doctorate in 1997. After his postdoctoral studies at TMU and the Polytechnic of Milan, he habilitated in Munich in 2003. And he was subsequently appointed to the ETH in Zurich, where he was promoted to a full professor in 2010. Robert develops therapy and assistance devices for people with restricted mobility. And he also founded the renowned Cybathlon event series that takes place in Zurich to facilitate a social dialogue about inclusion. And just one more thing, during his time here in Los Angeles as a fellow of the Thomas Mann House, he researches technological trends in the field of AI and robotics and their potential positive and negative effects on individuals with and without disabilities and on society as a whole. For those of you who are here for the first time tonight, my name is Oliver Hartmann and I'm the director of the Thomas Mann House. Since 2018, we are a residency center and space for transatlantic debates located here in the former exile home of Thomas Mann and his family, who lived here between 1942 and 52 after fleeing from Nazi Germany. Every year we invite around 15 outstanding personalities to stay and live with us here at the house. Robert is one of them. Rana Islam is another one who is currently here with us. Our fellows, they engage with other scholars, with community organizers and artists here in Los Angeles, in California, and across the United States. And we organize a lot of public programs, either here at the house or with our partners. That can be talks, we have a podcast and video series. And we do this in the spirit of Thomas Mann, who during his time in California dealt extensively in his writings and lectures with topics such as democracy, freedom of speech, and the power of the arts. Before I hand over the mic to you, I would also like to thank my team, our program director Benno Herz, Clara Tang, our project coordinator, Katrin Klüppel, our finance and administration officer, and Betty Herrera in the housekeeping, who are making all this so beautiful and happening. After the talk, we will have a reception, so if you have time, stay a little bit longer, have a glass of wine and some snacks, and continue the conversation. Thanks so much for coming tonight. And dear Robert, we are so excited to have you and your guests here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Oliver, for this introduction. Also, thank you and the team for organizing this, for making this possible, and thank you all for making the way here to the Thomas Mann House. For Thomas Mann, illness was never just a biological or medical matter. It carried symbolic, psychological, and cultural meaning, often bound up with his reflections on art, genius, and the tension between life and spirit. Mann depicted illness as a condition that enables insight, a state in which the artist is separated from ordinary life, allowing access to deeper truths. From his perspective, the term patient can certainly be extended also to people with physical impairments that are, in the words of Mann, separated from a productive and healthy world. In his novel, The Magic Mountain, which was published in 1924, the tuberculosis sanatorium in Davos is less about literal disease than about a heightened condition where disease creates distance from the healthy world of action, making space for thoughts and art. Consequently, illness becomes a metaphor for the artist's detachment from normality as a sign for both danger and privilege. But now, here we want to discuss about disability, about inclusion, about technology, about architecture, about arts and dance. In this podium discussion today, we want to not only speak about patients as defined by Thomas Mann, for example. We want to also speak especially about people with impairments, people with disabilities, which are not necessarily the same. It's not the same. Yeah? A person with a disability is not a patient in general. Disabilities are also not necessarily given by the people themselves and their personal factors, but because of limitations that are given by our environment and our society, by us humans. These limitations are also called barriers. So we want to speak also about physical barriers, but not only about physical barriers as we mentioned in the title. It's also about communicational barriers, attitudinal barriers, financial barriers. Barriers can also result from limitation with respect to affordability, availability, accessibility, and acceptance. And we want to speak about the ways how we may be able to get rid of such barriers to make our society more inclusive. So we have 4 guests today here, and I start to introduce them. Before you introduce yourself in a short intro talk, on your left, there's Professor Kelly Sharp, Chair of Department of Dance and Vice Chair for Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation from UC Irvine. Then Natalie Fang, she's a USC graduate and a production manager and data analyst. Professor David Reinkensmeyer, working in rehabilitation robotics, a colleague of mine. We know each other since we were PhD students and postdocs in the 90s, late 90s, also from UC Irvine. And Professor Burçin Bicerik Gerber, a pioneer in human billing interaction from USC. And I ask you now, Natalie, to start your intro talk.
Oh, okay. I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Natalie Fung. I'm from Pasadena, California, and I'm a double Trojan. So I received my bachelor's in public relations from USC and my master's in communication data science. And currently I am working at Dr. Francisco Valero Cuevas' company, Neuromuscular Dynamics, as a data analyst and production manager. To tell you a bit about my history, I was in a car accident when I was 21 years old. I suffered a spinal cord injury at the C5 level. At the time, I was a senior about to graduate early from USC. I was living on my own. I was a student worker on campus. I was interning at a nonprofit called Heal the Bay. And I was about to start my dream PR internship at Nickelodeon. Instead, I spent what was supposed to be my last semester at USC relearning how to breathe normally, relearning how to feed myself, and relearning how to brush my own teeth. In addition to the physical hardships that come with a cervical spinal cord injury, another difficult aspect was the social isolation. I went from a vibrant undergrad to stuck at home, watching from the sidelines as everyone else moved on without me. Luckily, I had friends in the spinal cord injury community who introduced me to the Robotics, which is a wheelchair dance team. It was a way for me to meet other women with spinal cord injuries. Fun fact, about 80% of people with spinal cord injuries are male. So it was nice to find young women with spinal cord injuries that I could relate to. And of course, it was also a great workout. That started my passion for advocacy. Within the Robotics, there's a mentorship program where I acted as a mentor for women and girls with disabilities. There's an annual event called the Robotics Experience where hundreds of women and girls with disabilities fly into Los Angeles for a weekend of dance classes, educational workshops, and bonding. And we also did brand campaigns where we partnered with companies such as Meta for Global Accessibility Awareness Day one year. We partnered with Aerie on their Aerie Real campaign and with Disney for their wheelchair Halloween costumes. In the rollouts, the goal for my advocacy was for the disability community to be seen. And we did that by taking up space and by providing representation. Back then, it was more rare to see a person with a disability in the media. But as the disability community started gaining more representation, my goal for the community was to be better understood. And what better way to understand an underrepresented community than with data? That brought me to the Communication Data Science program at USC. And I learned pretty early on that when I tried to do projects on disability, that there was not a lot of data available. There was broad data such as the percentage of disabled people in the country, disability employment rate, but not more nuanced data such as the types of disability that makes up that percentage or the types of employment that people with disabilities have. Luckily, I met Francisco and joined Valero Lab, where I got my first taste of disability-related research. And I got to see firsthand for the first time how disability-related research was conducted. I also had the opportunity to plan the Disability and Rehabilitation Engineering Conference with Francisco and the NSF. And now I'm working with neuromuscular dynamics on projects with NASA and NIH. And I hope to continue to use data to help society better understand the disability community.
Thank you. We will have time later for discussion, but if you have a very short question for basic understanding, which is now urgent for you, you can ask now. If not, I suggest to continue now with David Reinkensmeyer.
Yeah, so I thought I'd introduce myself just briefly too. This is an old picture of my lab. But you can see the types of robotic devices that we work on, sensor-based devices. So let's see what I do here. This one.
That's the right one, yes.
Okay, so I got into, I do robotic rehabilitation. So I work for, to design robots that help people with physical therapy, essentially. And I wanted to tell you how I got into it. So I was a graduate student doing a PhD at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and I was a member of a club. And one of the first meetings of the club, a woman in a wheelchair came up and said that she was looking for a volunteer to cook and feed her on Friday nights. So I ended up doing that and just learning about her. And I had a class in robotics where I had to do a project. And so I asked her, what would a task be that you could use a robot for? And she said, turning pages in a book. So this is, before, e-readers and iPhones and that. So I took a huge industrial robot like that and programmed it to turn pages in a book. And I got it to work, but completely impractical. And this is called assistive robots, okay? And but in getting to know my friend Pam, she has cerebral palsy and needed a lot of physical therapy. And so I started wondering, could you use technology for that? And so one of the devices my lab's invented, it's this one, just to give you a feel for it. So the idea is like people who are very, very weak after, say, a stroke or a spinal cord injury, they have trouble moving and want to improve coordination and strength. So this device, it has springs, it makes your arm feel like it's floating. It has a sensor for your hand, and you interact in sort of like a virtual world to do repetitive, engaging training. And it's in about 1,500 hospitals. It was licensed from UC Irvine by a Swiss company that sells it now. And just another example is, this is called the Music Love. And this is for finger dexterity training. The previous device cost about $60,000, but we wanted a device that could just be bought out of pocket. This is like $300. And you play Guitar Hero, which is the third most popular video game. So it's super engaging, a way to do dexterity training. And this is in about 15,000 homes now. And if you came to my lab, you would see that we built a lot of things that didn't work. It always makes for a good tour. We call it Robot Hall of Fame or Robot Graveyard. So if you ever want to come for a tour, I'm happy to do that. And I wanted to sort of say, what we're trying to do, this is sort of our dream. is that you could get into our machine and we could download Kung Fu into your brain like the Matrix. So we're trying to do it physically. We do work with some neural interfaces as well, but we're trying to do it through sort of intense physical training. And I think I had, how does this relate to participation? So just a perspective here, so individuals who are extremely weak and uncoordinated desire to work or exercise in certain ways, specific ways. So what we did was what we've been focused on is creating sort of exercise devices that focus on the types of tasks that people want to get better at. So I think it improves participation and exercise. And then I just wanted to sort of put a couple thoughts out there. So I think we're in a very important period now for rehabilitation robotics. So there's going to be an increasing number of activities of daily living that robots will help complete. And I think we're going to move into the age of assistive robotics. So here's my selective picture of robots in the world, but the dishwasher being the first. So when I was at MIT, we would debate whether that's a robot or not, but it's got motors and it's programmed, and so it is kind of a robot. And it does a useful task that we all enjoy, right? So, and then it took a long time for the next one, which was probably the Roomba, came out. Although a robot therapy device came out at MIT in 1998. And then we had the Roomba, and then we've now have legged exoskeletons, and we have self-driving taxis in 2020. But I think what we're going to see now is a rapid increase in the numbers of tasks that we're going to have robots available to do for us. And as I went through some of my own experiences with disability, so my friend Pam liked to go hiking, and the way she'd do it is someone would carry her on the back. And I think a robot could do that. You could have a robot that could carry you to do hiking. My dad had Alzheimer's, was very prone to falling. It's a very difficult situation to have someone with cognitive deficits who falls. And again, I think a robot, that could walk with them and kind of keep them safe. He actually had a robot monitoring him in the hospital. It was sort of like, I think someone was sitting in another state looking at him through a camera, when he was in the hospital. And a wheelchair user who needs transportation can call a Waymo. Locked-in user wants to play video games. We've seen that with Elon Musk's company Neuralink, where he was able to exceed his, or achieve very high levels of skills at video games now through a direct brain interface, through a chip planted in his head, even though he has no physical movement. And then a grad student who wants to excel at research, what we're seeing now with the ChatGPT, and just the way that can really give training and access to graduate students in a way that wasn't possible before. So just to conclude that, so I listened to The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and he brought up the psychological theory from the 60s by Bakken, where we have two fundamental sort of modes of existence, where we want autonomy and we want communion. Yeah. And sometimes they're at odds. He goes through how cell phones affects these two things and feeds into these. But I think those are interesting sort of categories to think about robotics in terms of improving our autonomy, but what it's going to do to our communion. So that's it for me.
Thank you, David. Yeah. Then let's continue with Kelly.
Oh, perfect. So hi, my name is Kelly Sharp. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I have a very interesting journey and a very different one. I'm trained in physical therapy and neuroscience, but I also came into the arts. And how my journey started within the arts was that when I was in the clinic doing one of my rotations, a patient, I asked them, they were nonverbal, I asked them what they wanted to do, and they said dance. And that was back then, I'm going to date myself, like 1942. That was back then when we had the yellow Walkmans. I don't know if you ever remember those. And I had like this yellow boom box, and I brought it into the hospital. I had to get special permission to bring it into this rehab unit. And this aphasic patient and I got up and we just danced through the whole hospital. And so fast forward that, I was actually doing my postdoc with Dr. Kramer, and I was at a picnic that was focused on individuals that had stroke. And this woman walks up to me, grabs me, and we start dancing. So fast forward that another 15 years, I am now the chair of the dance department, and I use dance as a rehabilitative tool for people with different types of different abilities. So that's the quick story. So really what my work focuses on, and it's really kind of dovetails really well with what Dave was talking about, right? Thinking about how do we use different technologies or different like fundamental ideas to look at autonomy versus communion, and I'm going to say community, and how do those integrate with something well-being, right? So all my work really is focusing at the crux of inclusion and belonging, but with these three ideas, right? Of dance, science, and overall well-being. And then the other thing is adding into there that there is a old school definition of what movement looks like, right? And dance looks like something different for everyone. And that is and the same thing, movement can look different for everyone. And that's my biggest advocacy thing that I work on in my own research, is really clearing and understanding that the way I dance, the way Dave dances, the way you dance, the way definitely the way Robert dances, we're all very different, right? And it doesn't mean it's not dance, right? But the sense of community that dance brings into the environment is really important to think about. I'm not going to go over this. There'll be a quiz at social hour, like what all this means. But it's just really talking about, there's a lot of work talking about the inclusion of what movement and dance and music and different types of formal arts does for plasticity and reformation in our brain. I'll skip you on that one. The same kind of thing here. It's just absolutely beautiful what happens, because dance is multimodal. It's not just movement, right? Can someone give me another aspect of dance that they think is important? Sequencing? Yeah, the motor sequencing. One more.
Spatial awareness.
Spatial awareness, yeah. And the really big one, which comes back to what Dave was saying about communion, is cultural relevance, right? And also going back to that sense of community, right? If you look back in the history of most cultures, there's some sort of movement, some sort of dance that drives this relativity. So what that looks like. So this quickly, just really tell you too that not as much as I study dance, I also think we need to get in the outdoors. So I'm really I just got a grant focused on the psychosocial effects of doing different types of activities, no matter what your ability is. So for example, tomorrow morning, I'll be driving back to Mammoth because we're doing a women's adaptive camp, mountain biking camp. And I'll be looking and taking some data, looking at what are the things that all individuals enjoy about being outside and being totally uninhibited and going 50 miles an hour on these bikes downhill. I think you should come with me. The other thing is I'm working on an NSF project too, just to be really quick, and thinking about relating how do we use different types of technologies. So we're using drone overhead data with 2D data. And looking at how different placements of movement and what does that look like. And I'm collaborating with a wonderful computer science person over at MIT. And we're putting together large data sets within this space. The other thing is really kind of using dance as a preventative strategy, right? For everyone, what does that look like, right? I'm working in a different community, a Latinx-based community in Orange County. And I'm actually bringing it to Mammoth as well too. So I'm really excited to bring in different types of communities where diabetes is prevalent, working on dance in that way. The other thing is that, and I can't understate this last bullet point, and then I'll stop talking. It's really important that people that are in academia and are also in educational places, and you're educating people who are treating people with different abilities, it is our responsibility to make sure they understand as a provider. So I work with residents, PM&R residents, and making sure they understand what is inclusive, what is access for their patient population, what are the resources. Because if a lot of programs don't focus on it. And the biggest thing I hear, and you can talk about this later, is that, well, where do we get these resources? My physician doesn't know, right? But it's as important as pedagogically that we figure out how to provide resources for all parties involved, right? So for a person with a different ability, for someone who's treating them, for Dave and I who are working with them, right? What does that look like? So I really think that advocacy and making sure, like from a pedagogical standpoint, we're making sure our research is touching everyone that's involved with, you know, all these individuals is really important. And it gets dropped, right? That pedagogical part, my resident looks at me a lot of times, they're like, why do I need to know that? I'm not going to answer that question. Go work with your patient and come back and tell me why, right? So I think it's really one of the things that we don't talk about enough is how does this all work in the bigger picture? So I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, let me show my last picture.
Oh.
It's really cool.
Are there meantime questions? Yes, to Kelly.
Just let me show the last picture.
I go back to the last picture.
I don't want to take too much longer.
I got just a quick question while you're looking at it.
Yeah.
It seems like, you know, dance takes a lot of courage, like to step in and like move or dance. Or, did you, in your research, have you found like overcoming the fear of acceptance, or what's the relationship between that and some of the things that you study?
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. This is just some drone data we were collecting. You brought up a really good point. You have to ask some key questions before you start a study. So I made a bad decision the first dance project I did. I assumed that young male identifying individuals would want to work with other female able-bodied individuals. And they would want to do more like ballroom dancing or like, you know, Latin-based dancing. Absolutely not. They wanted to work by themselves. They didn't want to be judged. They wanted to listen to very inappropriate rap music. And they just wanted to jam out by themselves, right? And so I learned from that study that first time, because I had gotten all these like wonderful dancers and all these people were really excited to be part of the study. And then I did my little pre-survey and I was like, ooh, we gotta pivot quick. And so, you know, but really asking what is it they want and then really tailoring, and it takes time, right? If you're gonna start a group class, not to bring it into 40 or 50 people, start it off with like, you know, 6 people or 5 people, or sometimes maybe 2 people, and then start blending, right? So I had to learn all of this about trial and error, and then really setting the sense of community before you start dancing. And making this clear that dance it's what comes from our body, right? And having that conversation that it's not judgment. And that takes some time, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Let's continue with Burçin.
My name is Burçin Becer Gerber, a difficult name. If you can pass that. I am a professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department of University of Southern California. I bring a very different perspective, I think, and also I have a mixed background. So I studied architecture as well as civil engineering, and my doctoral degree was related to information technology within architecture, engineering, and construction industry. So with that short background, maybe you got a glimpse of what I'm interested in. I'm very interested in buildings and I'm very interested in space. And if you think about how much time we spend indoors, right? If you just think about your day today, where you were, where you woke up and where you went to work maybe, or your coffee shop, you would immediately understand where I'm coming from. We spend almost 95% of our time in LA, 95 probably, indoors, right, including our cars. I put this picture there. I grew up in Turkey. I grew up in a small city called Izmit. You wouldn't know. Yes, by the coast. Maybe you have been there. Maybe you know it from the earthquake. But it's like the Flint, Michigan of Turkey. So my school was next to a refinery, and my school bus passed by several factories from my home to school. And I was always intrigued with engineering and the structures and the complexity that they have. All those buildings and infrastructure that people try to hide, I was always interested in the complexity in them. I don't claim to be an architect. I have done research all my life, so I'm not a practicing architect. And when I present my work to designers, usually I'm found very technical. But when I present my work in engineering world, it is very utopian. So I kind of like I'm kind of a mixed match, or a misfit, I guess is a better word. So I start with this slide, and sometimes I even show it to my students. The work I do, and like all of you, is very technological. And many times we're very much intrigued with the next technology, right? The next AI, the next ChatGPT, whatever it is. But I start with this, okay, maybe technology is the answer, but what is the question, right? What problem we're trying to solve? It's not the next shiny technological invention. And I gave a little bit of introduction, right? I'm very much interested in indoor spaces and understanding how these spaces can be designed, constructed, and also operated around human needs. And the needs vary. So it could be healing in a hospital, or it could be satisfaction or productivity in an office environment, learning in a school. But I do tend to, and try to work with me here, and it's a little bit maybe far-reaching knowing the buildings that you're in, you spend most of your time. But think about your buildings as machines, as robotic elements, right? So think about buildings that know you, who you are, and can respond to you. So these are some of the things that I try to do at work, and we are, Robert mentioned, in an area called human building interaction. I know it's a busy slide, but at the center are human and individual and societal goals, right? Equity, privacy, sustainability, inclusion. And we're very much interested in human well-being and performance through building design and operation, and include with assisted technology, sensing and awareness. However, these diagonal or I guess connecting areas are the areas that we work on, right? How do you build trust between a built space that might know you and its users, and how can a building collaborate with its users? How do we model and simulate these environments being very inclusive? I'll give you an example. We're working on emergency evacuations, and we work with intelligent agents, but we're trying to incorporate like differences that we have, maybe in terms of movement, or in terms of perception of space, or in terms of our roles in our daily lives, a parent, a professor, and how do individuals respond? And how do we also, I'm very interested in bringing all of that information to the decision makers. If you think about buildings, you're the decision maker maybe in your home, but in your office or in other environments, there is a facility manager, a building manager, right? There are codes, there are other people making decisions. And those decisions really impact your daily life and the performance of the building. So this is just one example. I mean, if you just look at the two sides of this slide, that you will immediately get like different feelings, right? Being in the spaces on the left or the right. And more often than not, we find ourselves in spaces like the ones on the right. But I think spaces could integrate art, robotics, architecture, engineering, and spaces could be more like your friend who knows you, your best friend, and who can respond, sense to your needs. So this is an old slide as well, and this was related to one tangible example that many of us understand is thermal comfort. And this is where we were trying to build these things to understand thermal comfort preferences of individuals, and that really varies depending on your age and ethnicity, background, and other things. That we have integrated, and these are systems that actually collect data from individuals, and we do collect large sets of data. Now I think we have better devices, and integrate them into the building's operational systems so that they can respond to you rather than temperature setting. I'm sorry to be stuck there, but I think it's a good example. We can all relate. 73 Fahrenheit for all of us. I might buy it warmer, you might want cooler and such. Then we look into also how space could be inclusive, right? I'm very interested in sensory needs of different individuals. And when you think about lighting, noise, temperature, we have very different needs from the space. We have a new grant, and we're going to be working with autistic individuals, and I visited actually a school where they learn animation, but most of the time when they are integrated in the workspace, they cannot work with others because they have these, they hear the flickering or humming from the lighting, right? I mean, they cannot be in noisy spaces, or they are seeking noises, right? But if you think about your buildings right now, they're not designed for everybody. They're designed for the standard. This is one example of a kinetic facade, like how it can adapt actually depending on who's in the conference room. I also try to think about mundane elements as intelligent things. So this is a project that we have done. It's an office desk, an element that can be found very often in offices that through its sensors learn your preferences and your stress levels, and maybe what is bothering you that day, your mood, and then provide these ambient spaces for you to achieve your best that day for the tasks you have. So we also have a center, bless you, Center for Intelligent Environments. When you think about these intelligent environments, and I hope we also talk a little bit about these, there is trust and collaboration, but also privacy and security, very important things that we collect, how users interact with the environment, as well as the psychology of being in these intelligent environments. So I think I'm gonna leave with that, and maybe we can move to the Q&A.
Thank you. Short questions to question? Yes, one short question.
I just have a question about how that this seems like the deepest surveillance that I've ever heard about. So I'm really curious how you imagine.
Yeah.
Many of us are trying to get away from surveillance.
Yeah. No, that's not the intention. So in our, but you're right. The work or the data could be used in different ways, right? I mean, one simple example that we're very, very careful about is if we're monitoring workers. Right? Employers could be like, oh, you're productive, you're not productive, or whatever. So those kind of things could happen. That's not the intention, but with every technology that you develop, there could be negative consequences. So we're very careful about that. Like, I learned this recently. If data is collected in a workspace, it's actually employers. Very interesting. It's not yours. So we don't have the codes. We don't have the standards. Those were olden days, probably rules that don't apply anymore. You have your smartwatch. We collect environmental data, and from very simple environmental data, we can tell when you took a shower or who you're talking to, right? Who's in your social circles. That's a very, very good question. But I mean, something to think about, not run away from, and be very careful. In all of our research, the data is yours, so you can release as much or little data as you want. But that's a major concern. But it's happening not in the building space. Every piece of technology that we're voluntarily using.
Okay, let's start with a podium discussion now. I thought to split the discussion into 3 chapters. First, I want to discuss with you aspects about barriers. Which barriers do exist in the lives of people with disability, but also in certain institutions in our society. Then I want to speak about what is inclusion, what do we actually want to make the world more inclusive. And third, I want to speak about what can we do to realize a more inclusive world, and how can we get rid of barriers by your projects, for example, you're doing. I want to start with Natalie and ask you, how do your impairment hinder you in your daily life? What barriers do exist in your work life? How does it affect your quality of life?
I guess starting with physical barriers, there's always the wheelchair access. And of course we have the ADA, but then the ADA is the floor. And so there are a lot of buildings that are still not up to par. So that's definitely one large barrier. But I think for me specifically, personally, I think transportation is a huge barrier, especially when it comes to having a 400-pound wheelchair. It does not fit in every car, and it is very difficult to find transportation. I think that's definitely a huge barrier when it comes to physical.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
And I think that's fully plausible, and even for people without disability, something where they say, yes, of course. But I think there are other barriers which affect you in daily life, which are not so prominent for those people without a disability, such as certain attitudes of people, which might not be on purpose, but affect your life.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think I have been turned away from establishments before just for being a wheelchair user, even though it's technically not legal, but it still happens in this day and age. Especially for having a service dog, they don't understand that a service dog is a medical device and that I do need her to function in daily life. And I've been turned away from establishments for having a service dog. There's, people who believe that they they believe that they have the right to know your personal information. People will come up and ask very personal questions about probably the most traumatic part of my life and do it very casually. And yeah, there's a lot of things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. You were treated at Ranchos Los Amigos Rehabilitation Center in LA.
Yes.
And what kind of barriers did you encounter in the therapeutic treatment there? And how was the transfer then from being a patient, becoming a person without illness, trying to manage their life at home?
Well, seeing Dave's robotics and therapy was really cool because, when I was first injured, it looked very different than how I am now. And physical therapy consisted of breathing exercises only. That was it. Because, my diaphragm was affected from the spinal cord injury. And there wasn't much else I could do in physical therapy, and they didn't know what to do. And so the only thing that we did was breathing exercises. And so seeing that there's so much potential for these therapies and robotics and how they could help, it's amazing. So that was definitely something at Rancho. Another thing is there is, the medical model versus the social model where clinicians maybe treat your disability as more of a problem and it's something to fix, whereas at a certain point after your disability, you want to move on, I believe. And it's because you spend so many years just in recovery and trying to get back to what is considered quote unquote normal. But then with a spinal cord injury, there's still no cure.
I read in some of your statements on your webpage
Yes.
that it was somewhat challenging to get ready for daily life, right?
Yes.
Can you say something about this transfer?
The transfer from Rancho to
yes
to outside, yes. So when you're in a hospital setting, everyone is there to cater to you. And you have nurses, you have a call button. You press the button and someone will show up and get you whatever you need. And you go back home and you realize that the world did not stop when your world stopped. And everyone still has their own world and that they are not there to cater to you. And so it's definitely very jarring, I think, and very scary. going from that setting into the normal world, and especially being in a place like a hospital where everything is accessible. There are no steps. All the bathrooms are perfect. And you go into your own home and maybe you don't have a wheelchair accessible bathroom, or you don't have a bed that is, that you could use.
Yes. Before we come to some possible solutions, I want to ask David, you also worked and still work maybe with the Ranchos Los Amigos Rehab Center.
Yeah.
So you did follow, you're an engineer of course, but you did follow these therapeutic processes there. What kind of barriers did you observe there in their daily work?
Yeah, it's interesting. Rancho, it's in Downey, Rancho Los Amigos National Rehabilitation Hospital, and it's world renowned and was a pioneer in many technologies. They made the first multi-degree of freedom arm for having do task for people. It's in the Computer History Museum in Menlo Park right now. It's called the Golden Arm. Really cool engineering from the 50s. And they had the first fully implanted electrical stimulator for helping people have trouble lifting their toe when they're walking. Fully implanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, like, and yet it sounds like, what was your exposure? I know they have like a lot of high tech there.
To technology?
Yeah, what was your exposure during, because I think it's...
Electrical stimulation.
Yes.
That was...
Electrical stimulation.
That was, I think, that extent of the technology used.
Okay, yeah. And they do have robotic devices there, but did you try like the Locomod or any of those things? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So that's interesting. It's this robotic therapy field started, Robert is one of the founders of it as well. And it started, 30 or 40 years ago. And there's 60 or 70 companies now. And most hospitals have these devices. But then whether or not they get used is sort of sporadic.
Yeah.
Some hospitals use them heavily and some don't use them as much. And I don't know, so that's just the uptake of the device as a therapy tool is kind of an interesting, what are the barriers there that are causing that? Even at some place like Rancho that's renowned for being a cutting edge kind of technology place.
Do you think the reason for this kind of maybe fear, or is it fear using novel technology? Is it lack of funding? What are the reasons that some hospitals or centers don't are accepting these technologies?
Yeah, I mean, Kelly is a physical therapist and could probably comment on that, but I think therapists, it's a very, you're trying to do a very one-on-one, hands-on type of therapy with people.
Yeah, is it okay if I touch you? Do I have permission? I think it's this. It's human touch.
The human touch.
Sorry, I asked for permission. I think that's one of the fears, right? Is not having that human touch. I'd love to talk to you more about that experience because there's also so many sensors that they use for breathing at Rancho as well too.
Really?
Yeah, they have like this wearable vest that like will measure your
Oh no, mine was put a weight on your chest and breathe.
Yeah. It's so interesting how people, this brings up another barrier to access and inclusion of resources, right?
Yes.
Speaking
about barriers at home, when people get out of the hospital, they might still need personal assistance or technical assistance. Can be just a wheelchair, can be a change in the living room. In their home. What are the barriers there? Kelly or Dave?
There's so many just even getting into the door, right? So just a 36-inch door. Most doors are 27 to 28 inches. A typical wheelchair like yours doesn't fit through the door. So just even thinking about that, right? Like doing ADLs, getting healthcare, getting insurance to pay for catheters, right? This is a huge one. They only cover for like 5 days out of the month, right? And depending.
Most people I know need to pay out of pocket to use the bathroom every month.
Right, absolutely.
It's especially as a financial barrier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And these are things that people don't know about, right? And then, even just social barriers of once you get into your home, how do you get out of your home and all of these things.
In your work with people with disabilities doing outdoor activities, dance activities, sports activities, what barriers do you experience besides the physical ones?
I mean, the technology within, the adaptive equipment has come a really long way, so that is not such a barrier. I mean, if you have the money to buy a $40,000 adaptive bike, right? So I work with a group called Disabled Sports of Eastern Sierras, and we raise a lot of money to buy these bikes, right? Or to buy ski equipment that's adaptive. And so I think that the barrier there to outdoor activity is A, you gotta get to the outdoor activity, right? B is you have to be able to afford and have this special training to work within that, within those adaptive things. But where that is going, I think that there's no replacement for the outdoors, right? And so I think that what we have to do in Rancho actually has one of the largest resource centers for these adaptive sports, and getting individuals into different kinds of sports is really make sure that we're putting our resources out there into the community.
And do you think that enough people do know about these programs? There could be communicational barriers of those people with sensory deficits who don't get the information, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I talked about this extensively. I think that, first of all, there's this bimodal distribution of where people find out their information. And some of it, a lot of individuals aren't on Facebook, aren't on Instagram, actually, or maybe don't have the access to those types of things. So goes back to my whole idea, this whole thing about who are you seeing as a physician? Why are they not sharing out all of these resources, right? Like these PM&R docs or your primary care docs. We need to do a better job there, in my opinion. But I also train residents. So I think that we need to make sure that that's the source, that a lot of these people will learn about these activities. I'd like to know your thoughts on that one too, because it's hard to find all the resources.
Yeah, I think a lot of people find their resources maybe when they go to outpatient clinics.
Yeah.
Like I did my outpatient at Casa Colina in Pomona, so when you go to the clinic, then you will see the information. But after a certain amount of time, people don't continue going to therapy, going to occupational therapy, going to physical therapy. They would rather, work out on their own than go into a clinical setting. And so, it's definitely hard to find out about those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think another thing is also I forget who asked the question about being brave.
Yeah.
And I think it's scary for a lot of people to try new things.
Absolutely.
It might also be that the patients do not know what is the best. There's evidence, and the evidence is well known in scientific communities, but not at the patient side. There needs to be somebody maybe who tells them what is good for the body, for the life, for the life
That's
quality.
That's their position.
Right, and not all of them might do it, right?
No, I agree.
Yes.
It's not at all my field, and I don't want to say something that is wrong, but I know robotics and construction, and there are very amazing devices that work, but usually not used because they don't know how to use it. So sometimes training, right, the caregivers and like simple things and educating them on, or reskilling and upskilling, right? In research world, we know those things exist, but getting them trickled down to the end users sometimes is very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you spoke a lot about user needs and more general aspects in your work. What would you derive? What are the typical challenges for people with different kind of disabilities? And again, I'm thinking not only about physical disabilities.
Yeah, I think there are, I'm thinking about from physical built environment perspective, so we don't have inclusive spaces, right? I think Natalie mentioned some of the challenges that she has in her personal life. But if you think about how different we are and our differences in terms of physical or sensory or emotional needs, we don't have these spaces that respond to those needs. Usually we build for the common, right? Or we have some kind of codes, building codes, or some kind of guidelines that we follow. But these people that I have been working with, even though they are very talented and they have great skills, they cannot find a comfortable workspace to work in, right? So the way that we design machines or the way that we design spaces are not inclusive. So I think that's where we should start from. And unless we talk with the end users, and I come from engineering world, it sometimes is rare, right? Sometimes engineers are great problem solvers and they go and solve the problem, but they don't necessarily solve the problem for all. And it's very rare to talk to the stakeholders or talk to the community that are going to be end users or implementing those solutions. And in the absence of that, we create these solutions that might work for one or some, but not all. And I think that's one of the barriers, because science and technology could be there, but adoption is definitely not there.
Speaking about user needs, how do you get the right user needs to make the environments more inclusive?
I mean, we employ different kinds of methods, and in our research, first we were developing things in the lab and trying to implement them, then realize that it's actually end users need to be involved, so we always have a stakeholder advisory panel for people who will be using the technologies as well as who will be operating the technologies. This is where I was going, right? Because it's not always end users who will be interacting with the technology. Sometimes it's somebody else enabling that interaction between the user and the technology. So our recent work is always around engaging the community that will be using these technologies. And it is usually very difficult because the requirements are much higher, that are complex than developing something in the lab. We do a lot of surveys, we do a lot of collection from end users and user verification studies, designing with the users. So these are some of the methods I think well known in this community that we try to employ.
Observe environments?
Absolutely,
without
yes.
letting the people know? Maybe?
I mean, we usually
to have more naive participants, otherwise they might be biased.
We usually have consent because we can't do research without consent, but we do try to do naturalistic studies over long periods of time, months and years, right? Because when you're known to you know that you're being observed maybe a day or a week, you might modify your behavior, but over a year it becomes more challenging. But we do usually get consent.
Good. Let's come to the second part. I want to speak now about inclusion. What is inclusion for you? What do you want? What do we want? And I would like again to start with Natalie. How would you? What does inclusion mean for you personally? What would be the best or the most urgent aspect of inclusion for you?
Oh, the most urgent aspect. That's a hard question, but I think when it comes to inclusion, what I would like to see is me not being the only wheelchair user in the room. That happens a lot, unfortunately. And it's, I don't want to be the only person graduating with a disability, or the only person in a wheelchair graduating with a disability, or, people tell me a lot like, oh, I don't know anyone, like my doctor, when I tell him my plans, he says, I don't know any other quadriplegics trying to work. And so that's what I want. I want people with disabilities to know that they are, that they do belong here and they are included in all of these spaces. But I think it is hard for people with disabilities to go out there sometimes.
And Kelly, Dave, Puchin, what does inclusion mean for you, especially in your work with people with disabilities or other groups in our society?
It's such a hard word because I think that I also work with the word dance. And I think when I first left the School of Medicine, I went into dance. I got a really hard time because my definition of dance is anyone can dance, right? And when you walk in, there's a lot of conservative, and there's no professional dance is amazing, whatever it looks like. But really, I think inclusive environment for dance, to me, would mean everyone is welcome to come into the studio, no matter what their ability is, no matter whether they can't do a dorsiflexion or point their feet or actually be on their feet, right? Whatever it looks like. I would love to see that more in academic settings of in that way. Mm-hmm. That's just the dance aspect. I think there's a lot of other aspects. Inclusion is problematic right now in our country, but that's a different story.
I'll just, there's a book by a designer for disability technology, Sarah Hendren in Boston. It's What Can a Body Do? Yeah. But she had this phrase that said that design and disability, it's about the universal human experience of getting help. That's it. And some of that makes me think about inclusion. Like it's universal. You know, all of us need help. And what we're trying to do is build teams of people that work to identify needs and include that you can include people in the tasks that they want to do through technologies. So I think I'll take it that way. So.
Yeah, thanks. Christine?
It's a difficult question, but maybe it's a world where friction for daily activities is lifted, right? So there's always friction in life, but that everybody, whatever abilities or disabilities you have, could go through your life without a friction. I think that's something we take it for granted if you don't have a disability, but many people don't. So that would be an inclusive environment for me.
One more specific question to Dave. When you work, and also maybe Kelly, when you work with people with disabilities or patients coming to be involved in any kind of studies, are they coming with this kind of inclusive desire to be better participating in society, or do they have other motivation to join?
Yeah, I think, so we've had, probably several thousand people have volunteered in my lab over the years. Mostly people have had strokes. And I think most people come because multiple motivations. One is fundamentally like, hey, we're doing a study that can hopefully help you learn how to move better and do some tasks that you couldn't do before, lift a grocery bag or open a door, things like that. So people like that. They like the social interaction. My grad students are awesome. And my physical therapist, Vicky Chan, is amazing. So they love the social interaction and just that's that communion part. I think the feeling of contributing to science as well is something meaningful to a lot of people. That, not everything we do is going to be a breakthrough, but you're sort of contributing to the gradual progress of learning how the world works and what you can do to make discoveries. So I think those are the main things.
Before we go to the third chapter, do you have any questions to our four speakers about barriers, about inclusion? How do you personally experience inclusion, or also separation, exclusion, or any things to add?
Well, one thing that Will is spoken about, but I think, and it often gets left out, is ageism. Because many of these things you're speaking about are, let's say, accept people over age. So they maybe live one way and then they're shocked that they need to adjust so dramatically. So I'm just maybe wondering how that figures to your work.
I know the statistic that each of us will live. Average person is going to live about 20% of their life disabled. The average person will live about 20% of their life disabled, and at any one time, about 20% of the population is disabled as well. But each one of us, on average, you can count for about 20% of your life of having a disability.
What question about the data? Does that include like the the time we spent as babies, because we're pretty much disabled.
Yeah, that's right. 20%. Oh, you think about it, yeah, that's a great point. We're completely dependent, and we have a hard-fought battle for independence through our teenage years, right? And we have this hard. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Francisco.
Just very briefly, at Rancho Los Amigos, we had a project with Caroline Winston and others about aging with and into a disability. So you think about disability not being these exceptional cases, but we are all aging into a disability. You've not had a disability. So if you see this as a situation for everyone, then we can turn it around and not pretend to be healthy and then we're not, right? Everyone in this room has some limitation in their life. We just probably pretend that that's okay, but in reality,
that's right. Either it's not visible, or people are not able or not wanting to join events like this, or studying or working. So there's a high number, but not so visible, unfortunately.
We like to say that the disability community is the only community that everyone is going to join at some point.
That's
right.
Right. Yeah. That's right. One more question
to that end. With Bocomat and is it Cycloflurin? Can you speak to the advancements and the time frame you have to look forward to circumvent the what we're talking about in terms of our demise or struggle or challenge at that area?
Maybe I'll shortly explain. You mentioned two terms. Locomat is a gait rehabilitation device which was developed in Switzerland. I was later involved a little bit in development. It's a device for treatment of people, for example, after stroke. And the idea is that to get out of the device, to maybe be able to walk in daily life without the device. And the Cyberlon is a competition which was mentioned at the intro by Oliver, which I invented more than 10 years ago, for people with disabilities who are allowed. It's a kind of Paralympics, but the people with disabilities are allowed to use robotic aids to better perform tasks of daily life. And developing trying to answer your question, developments are going well, I would say, but slow. These two examples are different fields. Locomat is a therapy device. Here we still struggle with some of the challenges mentioned. They are expensive. People are afraid or are preferring human touch. Although it has been shown that the use of robotic devices can be very beneficial, especially because we can provide a higher doses. We can do more training, which is maybe not possible to do with therapists. But it's not to replace the therapist. And the Cybertlon's idea was to do something for inclusion, to bring together people with and without disabilities, to reduce awareness about disabilities, to get rid of some fears and barriers on the attitudinal side. And that also, I think it's a slow process, but it's
what's the barrier is economic when it comes to the robotics and the development that you're referring to?
Different barriers. With the Locomat, it's especially it's financial barriers. With people with disabilities in our society, it's beside the physical barriers also a lot of attitudinal barriers, which we have to manage and try to solve. Okay, let's go to the third chapter now to speak about how can we realize inclusion. What can we do to get rid of barriers? And Natalie, please allow me again to start with you. Since we see quite prominently you're using assistive devices like a quite advanced powered wheelchair. You're using a powered wheelchair because your lesion is a bit higher. Mm-hmm. Other people with spinal injury who can use their arms need only manual wheelchairs. But what would you say, is that already a great solution, or do you have suggestions? Could you imagine other devices for you to propagate environments like exoskeletons? These are powered orthosis devices which allow people to stand up and walk. What is your feedback and also criticism on these assistive devices?
So I'm very lucky, have a very fancy wheelchair. It can tilt, it can recline, and it can elevate so that I can be at eye level with people and reach things higher up. They also have very advanced wheelchairs that can stand the person up. And I think those are amazing because being in that standing position is so important for your body. The thing is, the more features that a wheelchair has, the heavier it gets, which is why my chair is 400 pounds. And I don't even know how much a standing wheelchair weighs. And then if you bring into that a stair climbing wheelchair, and then they have all of those amazing things as well, which are great. For example, the stair climbing wheelchairs, I think they get a lot of, they get a lot of press when they come out because they're so cool and robotic looking. But why can't we just have a ramp? Why do we need a whole wheelchair that can climb stairs? So yeah.
Good point. Are there other devices you're using at home, maybe for household, for cooking, for kitchen work?
I do. I use Amazon's Alexa to read like the time, the weather, things like that. I have an Apple Watch, which has been great for when I have fallen to call for help. And it also has fall detection on Apple Watches for wheelchair users. Siri has been great, always. Yeah.
Now, since you met, some of the guests you know already, but others you met, do you have special wishes for other future devices to Kelly, Dave, or Virgin? Or environmental change?
Virgin, I'm very excited to see how smart homes evolve, especially when it comes to disability. And, we've seen there, I forget what it's called at Rancho, but they have something there where it's like a transitional living facility, I think. So it shows what your home could be like if everything was accessible. And of course, that's not reality because it's expensive and, it's not doable for most people. But, where even the environment could change is amazing. So things like that, I would love to see that. And, Dave's technology is already in rehab centers, but hopefully see them used more. Yeah. I really do think it is, with the therapists, I think it is hard to adopt new technology, especially when they're physical therapists and occupational therapists that have been doing this for years without using these robots. And it's probably scary to try something new.
I read on your homepage that you say would be great to have more wheelchair accessible housing at the USC campus. Question to you, what do you think about student dorms with a mix of residents with and without disabilities? Would this be something appreciated by you and others?
Definitely. I know that that's the project that you're doing in Switzerland, and it's so cool to see something like that happen because finding housing at USC was a struggle. And there are wheelchair accessible units, but for some reason the university doesn't reserve them for wheelchair users. So, so it was hard to even ensure that I could get one of those units. Then when I moved into those units, I was the only wheelchair user, and then I find out from other wheelchair users that I know that they're trying to get into those units and they weren't able to, and they were just sitting empty. And then the following year, they moved in one wheelchair user and one non-wheelchair user. And then another girl I knew wanted to be in that apartment, but she couldn't get it because they gave it to a non-wheelchair user. So it's, yeah. So it would be amazing to have something like that. And also to have, just people around, because the wheelchair accessible units are isolated as well. Mm-hmm. It's in its own hallway. And, you don't really have other neighbors unless it's, there's 3 units altogether. And so having that, just a neighbor that you could knock on the door and be like, hey, sorry, I dropped something. Could you help me pick it up? Something like that would be amazing.
Kelly, can all people with disabilities join your activities? For example, the outdoor activities.
So I use different terms. So all people with all different abilities, all abilities, period. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So like this weekend, I'll be mountain biking with people with all different kinds of abilities, and different kinds of adaptive bikes, non-adaptive bikes, all over the spectrum in every space, right? Double amputees, quads, people that identify as neurodivergent in different ways, whatever that looks like. That's and individuals that we don't divide when we're working with these different groups. Don't divide them up by a different ability. Like all quads go this way, or all, it's all really about what their goals are. So I think it's really important that you come in with a unified, what is your goal? And we group people by goals, not by whatever ability that they identify with or not, right? So,
if I may mention another field, Paralympics.
Yeah.
Paralympics, it's great that we have it, and it developed very well, but many people might not see that it's also exclusive for those people, for example, who need powered devices to do any kind of movement. We have more severely affected people who might not be able to sit in an upright posture.
Right.
Should they participate in such events? Do they want to participate in such events? What is your recommendation? In such events you're organizing.
I mean, my recommendation is I think that anyone should try to do anything they want to try to do. And it's our job as a society to try to figure out how to help individuals be in the spot where what they want to do, whatever that looks like. Of course, that's idealistic, and that means that we have like as much income as one can, but I feel like we all should have the same resources. And once again, that's idealistic, but in the ideal world, I think everyone should have the same choices.
Yes, great. So, Brishi, if you could redesign one type of everyday task, everyday space to make it more inclusive, where would you start and why?
Maybe I can tie with something that I was thinking while we were discussing. Sometimes efforts of inclusivity creates exclusion. So I was thinking about when you guys were talking, I work with neurodivergent individuals as well, and sometimes companies create, the left side of the building is for neurodivergent individuals, right? I mean, I told to them they don't want to be excluded, they don't want to be in this corner, right? A nice space designed for them, they want to be with everybody, right? Or you don't want to be like, I don't know, these floors are for just wheelchair users. That limits them, and that also excludes them from their community or their group. So if I could design one space, I know everybody would expect me to maybe say home, but I would design a workspace. Because I've worked with so many individuals with different abilities that they work from home, but they want to be at work with their co-workers, but their space is not designed for them, that they always have to take the lower job or the lower title to work from home, because that's where they can design and not be in the workforce and, with others. And we do spend a lot of time at work, and I heard that many people maybe don't even get to work, right? I mean, that's a great part of, I think, bringing all different people with different abilities together. I would start from workspace, strangely.
Yes. When we talked before, you emphasized it's not about only removing physical barriers. You also try to design emotional well-being and sensory comfort areas.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Yeah, so we are working on this research where we're trying to understand how environment actually creates stress, anxiety, and fatigue, and low motivation, and things like that because of the sensory overload or underload and different needs that we have. So we're thinking about how this environment could sense your emotional space and then respond to that state to make you cheerful or improve your mood or maybe reduce your stress without really. There are spaces, again, like go to this room and there is like some soundscape and then come back, but in your own space.
Yes. In your example, we see very nicely how interdisciplinary the work is. It's working with civil engineers, architects, engineers, maybe also ergonomic experts and physicians. is this always a great challenge, a great chance, opportunity, or is it more a challenge? And
it's definitely a great opportunity. I also work, you listed some, but I work with psychologists, occupational scientists, occupational therapists as well. It is definitely an opportunity because these problems that or the challenges that we're trying to solve is not one discipline's area, right? I mean, there's physical space, there's medical space, there's emotional space. I mean, we all have to come together to do this, but it's certainly not easy because our system is not designed in an integrated way. We're always like, why would I talk to a civil engineer, right? I mean, we're so many degrees separated from each other. And also our methods and even our language is not a common language. So it takes a lot of talking about barriers of that kind of collaboration. It takes years sometimes to establish a common language that you're speaking the same language, not thinking you are, but you're like passing ships. But definitely I don't see any other way than interdisciplinary collaboration in this space if you want to do meaningful, find meaningful solutions.
Yeah, there are many challenges, as you just said, language, for example, understanding each other. What can we do to improve this? Mm-hmm. To allow a better interdisciplinary collaboration? What can we do to
what can we... simply listen to each other more, but in an intentional way, right? We always say we listen or we talk, but sometimes we don't. We're always coming from our disciplinary perspective and thinking this is the way to go when you try to integrate. And having more opportunities like this that we can even talk to each other and learn from each other. It doesn't often happen, right? We're in our silos. Or finding opportunities or projects to work together, right? You talked about the volunteers, you're doing activities, and these things that don't have to be just within the research or within the work, but in common life as well. Because I always feel like if we understand each other truly, then we can help each other in a more meaningful way. So creating more of those interactions so that we can understand each other's perspective, I think is the key.
And Dave, same question to you. How do you make it possible to work successfully together with physicians, therapists, and engineers?
Let's see. Well, I'm married an occupational therapist, so my wife is here in the back, so there. So, and that has been immensely helpful because I can discuss when I go home, and she has the practical experience of being in the hospital and working with people every day. So that's one possibility, I guess. Yeah, but
it's late for some of us.
Yeah.
It's a new app. It's an AI model.
It's coming. Yeah. But finding fun people, having fun collaborations. I think, and like you said, wanting to learn from other people, I think is the best thing.
And for this, we need to spend time together, not have too much remote distances among the team workers, right? And I think you have it in your labs. One maybe urgent question for many people, maybe also in this room, is, there's a robot. Many people think about the dangerous aspects of robots. Robots are not always positive. Yeah? If you look at Hollywood, here next door, they're often the bad guys. Yeah. People are afraid of robots. So will we give them a chance to become more prominent and more helpful in the field of therapy? Will they even replace therapists somewhere in maybe not 10 years, but in 100 years?
Yeah, I think, in preparing for this and thinking about it, I think all of us probably have in our pocket right now this thing. I'm old enough not to have had one of these, and we all have this in our pocket right now. And I'm wondering if in 20 years we'll all have come to the party with a robot assistant, and they'll have a little their own personalities. They'll be dressed up in a certain way, but you can imagine it's not that different than this. There's a lot of barriers to it, but I think, would we have predicted that we would all carry a little computer in our pocket all the time and then be glued to it? It's very, very interesting. I think.
Yeah, such devices like the phone can augment us, especially those people who might have hearing problems. We can do speech-to-text captioning. The wheelchairs can get maybe even more powerful, even smaller, smarter, maybe invisible. When we reach the status that we not only augment people but enhance them to give them superpower, will this be good or bad?
We should defer to Tyler in the back, because this is what his research is partly doing at UCLA. I don't know if we can take one for the audience, but a comment on that. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to us about human augmentation.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I mean, the reality is that the technological capabilities aren't there yet, but they're really darn close. Like we now have motors that are better than muscles, more efficient than muscles, more powerful than muscles, and the same size factor. The downside to motors, they run on electricity, I'm not sure. But I think that's something that as those continue to get better, they'll run. I think as far as AI control systems are getting better. And so we're coming to a point very soon where we're going to have to engage with these more, I think, difficult ethical questions about what augmentation means. Those of us who sort of think a lot in this space, I think we think of all of this, I don't want to speak universally, but a subset of us certainly think about all of this as just creating opportunities for people to have different experiences. And historically, there's always been this sort of dividing line where, like, if you're restoring someone to their baseline function, then it's rehabilitation. And if you're pushing them past their baseline function, then it's augmentation. But I would posit that baseline function is arbitrary, right? And it actually changes for all of us on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, as we age. And so it's really all just about creating opportunities to engage with the world in different ways through technology. So I view that as a very positive thing. Yeah. I think access will be huge, and making sure that access is regulated and not just centered on people who have more financial resources will be huge. But in general, I think this will be a positive drawback.
You mentioned 2 layers, rehabilitation, augmentation. I was missing the 3rd layer, enhancement. If a person with any kind of disease or impairment gets great financial support, gets superhuman power, then everybody may want to have this. What shall we do then?
Yeah, and I think I would say that I would put that in the same augmentation category, the same category as augmentation. Again, the idea is that at some point we're taking someone wherever they happen to be on a given day, and we're saying, you want to fly today? Let's go fly, right? You want to run 30 miles an hour today and go through the woods? Let's do that, because that's a different experience that creates opportunity for you to engage with the world in a different way. And if that's what you want to do, then that's something that we can facilitate.
Great. Let's come to an end. The light is getting brighter and brighter. Just to finish this session, I want to ask and try. It's not so easy to what I ask you now, but if you're able to summarize your future wish about inclusion with one word or a short phrase. What is your personal wish to change in your future or the future in our society, from your perspective in the field of building rehab technology, person with an impairment, dance and
I'm ready.
One word, go for it.
Go for Perception.
Perception.
What'd you say?
Perception.
Thank you.
Totally agree.
Natalie?
I feel like there's a PR issue here. Technology's got great PR, disability doesn't have such a good PR.
Yes. And also, like, going back
We're working on it.
Experience, right? How do we define experience?
That's right.
The rhetoric idea would be to just inhale the term and digest it without further discussion.
Okay,
maybe that we
perception.
can then go to the upper row. Perception from Kelly. Natalie?
Wait, come back to me.
Yes, Dave?
I'm going to go communion.
Communion?
One word is really difficult for me, but I just want to say something. When we think about, okay, see, one word is difficult. I took the microphone, not giving back. When we think about robots, the way that I always like, the way we're discussing is always the motor function, but there is the mind function that comes with it. I think we really need to be very careful. And the word that comes to my mind is bias, because there's a lot of bias in the data we're training these robots with, right? I know that you want to close it up, but I'll give an example. Early days of translation, and I speak Turkish, we don't have he, she.
Yeah.
When we put it is a doctor, it translates he is a doctor. And when you put it is a teacher,
It says
she is a teacher, right? Because the models were trained with bias. So I really want to be careful when we're having, I mean, you made amazing comments, right? But it's not just the motor ability, the mind of the robot is really important, and it has to be inclusive. Sorry, that was really long. One
Final
word.
term, phrase.
Bias.
Bias. Good. And very final.
So my phrase will be, it takes a village. So thank you for being part of the village.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks for you being here. Thanks for the organizers, the team of the Thomas Mann House. And now I, in the name of the Thomas Mann House, invite you to some food outside and some drinks, some wine. Please enjoy and continue the discussion with our panelists. Thank you.